In this video I'm going to show you how to stretch the Tensor Fasciae Latae muscle, or TFL. So this is a particularly useful stretch for runners or for those athletes that suffer from ITB syndrome or have particularly restricted hips. So the Tensor Fasciae Latae, or TFL, is a small muscle that lies at the front of the hip joint here. It attaches to the top of the iliotibial band, which runs down the outside of the leg to the knee joint. As I say, it is a small muscle and it performs a bit of a stabilising role really. The movements it assists with are threefold really. So out to the side, so moving the hip joint out to the side, moving the hip joint forward, and then also moving the hip joint into medial rotation, so internally rotating the hip. And it assists with all three of those movements. And whilst it is small, if it does become tight, it can become problematic, and it can cause symptoms of iliotibial band syndrome, which is pain on the outside of the knee here, and also lead to restricted hip joints. So it is important to stretch it. But it's also important to address the root cause of why the TFL is getting tight. One common example is in long distance runners. For example, when the hip flexors get particularly fatigued, and hip flexors are responsible for the big sort of flexion movement of the hip. When they're fatigued, then TFL steps in to assist and quickly becomes overloaded and becomes very tight. So in that instance, it would be important not only to stretch TFL, but also to address the weakness in the hip flexors. Another example is if glute med is not working efficiently, then also TFL can help and assist glute med, and then it again quickly becomes overloaded and becomes tight. So in that instance, it would also be important to address the glute med weakness. So how do you stretch TFL then? Well, you need to stand over arm's distance away from a wall. So here I'm actually stretching the TFL on my left side. You need to lean into the wall so that you're creating a bit of an arch on the side of the TFL that you're stretching, and move your other leg across towards the wall, and then you kind of lean forward so that you're putting that hip into extension. And as you lean forward, you should feel a stretch on the outside of the hip, so here. And then you need to hold that for about 15 seconds. So that is an effective stretch for TFL. Happy stretching.